In today's journey, we will introduce you to the tilt hydrometer and explain what it can and cannot do. This is not sponsored content, but we have been in contact with Tilt during this process. But before we get too excited and opening everything, let's wait a double moment and explain what the tilt hydrometer is not. Specifically, it is not a replacement for your refractometer or your hydrometer. Although all three of these devices can tell you a specific gravity, nothing actually replaces your hydrometer. When used properly, nothing will ever be as consistent or precise as your hydrometer without the use of high-end laboratory equipment. We also spoke to Tilt directly about this matter and got a quote saying, "No, we recommend keeping your traditional hydrometer and/or refractometer. Consider the Tilt another tool for brewing." End quote. In fact, at no point in the website do they mention to replace your hydrometer with your tilt. In fact, most people even forget you're supposed to adjust the null point of your refractometer every time you use it. Also, hydrometer reading should be accompanied by a temperature reading every time as well. Otherwise, all your data points are just educated guesses. And something else we'll clear up now is that you can in fact dry hop with a tilt hydrometer in your fermenter. The hops should just be bagged like any fruit or oak or other additions that you add into your beer that could float around and interfere with the tilt hydrometer's ability to be buoyant. We recommend using glass marbles or stainless steel washers to weight down the bag. In fact, even if you weren't using a tilt hydrometer, we would still recommend you use some sort of containment device for your hops or other late additions. But let's take a look inside the box so that we can point out what you should be looking for if you are purchasing in store. There are a couple things you should look for and check before you actually purchase one. And had we watched this video before, we wouldn't have had to wait for Marcus to send us out a second one. More on that later. Also, you should be more gentle with it, as it's a scientific tool, not a toy. No, my boy. Although a very common mistake is that people think that this is the tilt already, when in fact it is inside of its own storage tube at this point. And there are a number of bad reviews out there saying that the tilt doesn't work, when in fact they're trying to use it while it's still inside of that tube. That's just where it should live when not in use. The last important thing to note before purchasing multiple tilts at the same time is that color isn't just for aesthetics. It's actually how it will communicate with the app and tell you which one is which. That is because the tilt hydrometers don't actually connect Bluetooth. They use the iBeacon protocol to communicate wirelessly instead. We believe this to be why it's able to get such good battery life. And just in case you wanted a good size comparison, it's about the size of a hydrometer and just barely fits inside of the hydrometer testing tube. But as we were mentioning earlier, our original pink tilt hydrometer came with a rare defect. Not only did it come with a dead battery, but it also drained the replacement battery within 24 hours. We could have avoided this by pulling out the Tilt 2 app on our phone and then connecting it in store. Don't know what Phil's swiping at, but all you have to do is hold a tilt at about 45-degree angles for about 5 seconds and it'll start shooting out data to your phone. When it's coming out of sleep, it might throw you some weird information at first until it gets a chance to get its bearings straight. But this quick check could be done with inside the box itself. Although this one's completely dead at this point. And I can already hear a particular shipping department groaning, but this is a quick check that could be done to prevent any return sales. To start the test, either stand up the tilt or lay it on its side. After a few seconds, put it at about 45-degree angle, and after 5 seconds, you should see 3 green blinking lights on the inside, right about here. Unfortunately, it's really hard to shoot it under these intense studio lights. Although at this point, you may just have a dead battery, and there's a way of solving that. And because the opening is so small and tough to grab, we recommend using gloves to get better grip. Although, we had to go completely overkill. But don't just go in at it raw. Use a rubber band for protection. For good measure, the factory tightens these down really good to make sure that they're not going to have any leaking problems. We, however, already opened this one up, and there was no damage from using the robo grips. Once you have the end removed, you can take out the circuit board that contains all of the parts that make up the tilt hydrometer. This is when the circuit board is at its most vulnerable, so do be careful with it. But to replace the battery, it is just as simple as removing the battery and replacing it with another 123 lithium battery, sometimes referred to as a 123A battery. And you may be tempted to use a rechargeable battery instead, but don't, as the weight difference will cause a problem with the tilt unless you do some advanced calibration techniques. We will put a link to that below in the description. Although we did use one earlier on to test how quickly this really was dying because we didn't actually believe it ourselves. So we've actually been removing, replacing, and putting this cap back in a lot of times, and we haven't noticed any leakage. So if you were worried about that from a long-term perspective, we haven't had a problem. We do, however, highly recommend only hand tightening it, as using tools may cause the plastic to crack. However, if you find that you have a defective model yourself, do contact Tilt directly, and they should get back to you within a day or two. Although, if you are local to your homebrew supply shop, that might be easier. But Tilt made exchanging the bad one for the good one really easy. But despite all of the setbacks, we're still really excited to use the Tilt in our studio. Although we are not comfortable with reviewing it quite yet, as we haven't had much hands-on experience with actually using it in the field. But that will soon change, and check the link in the description if we have uploaded the new video yet.